I left you hanging last episode with our first start, but no first drive. So, in this video, that's what I'm doing right now. But first, we've had a few issues along the way, mistakes were made, and I even had to undo some of the work from that last episode before our final job of making the intercooler and all the piping fit. I'd feel a lot better about those issues if any of you could give this video a like or subscribe to the channel though. Worth a shot, it all helps. At least it all seems to be working for now though. Welcome back into Browney's garage. As I said up top, the big job for today is to finish all the piping and to fit up our factory intercooler so that I know I have everything in its right place. Then we can try and fit this eBay shiny and maybe slightly upgraded version. Sounds simple until you consider that it looks like we'll have to move or deal with quite a bit of stuff in this front end to get this to fit up. Before that though, we're starting with confession time. Last video, we'd managed to get far enough to start and see that turbo spool for the first time. It also gave us a chance to check for oil flow through the turbo because we hadn't fit the oil drain yet. Everything looked great, but it was only a quick start. Once I went to fit the factory turbo oil drain, I noticed that the turbo core was clocked just a little off, and the oil drain was never going to reach far enough to connect to our sump, no matter how much persuasion I gave it. And man, did I try. The problem I believe is that I thought, logically, in my head, the oil feed and drain should be pretty much directly straight up and down vertical to give the best flow for the drain, as it only goes off gravity really. Nope, wrong. That's what I get for using my own judgment. Seems from factory these are angled with the feed further away from the exhaust manifold and more following the slight angle of the manifold that the turbo mounts to. So I was out with the turbo to address this, and this time I thought I'd try pulling the turbo, manifold, dump pipe and lines all off as one assembly. I can confirm this is a lot easier way to do it than doing the turbo to manifold bolts up on the car. That was sorted at the bench off camera and the assembly was ready to go back in and scratch my nice shiny rocker cover in the process. I really don't want to talk about it. At this stage it looked like the factory drain would now work, but remember how I said I'd tried to persuade it to fit before? Well, even without these can fatigue and leak at the flex or at the joints, and I really wasn't going to trust it now. So instead I picked up an Aeroflow oil drain kit to suit the car and fit that up. Looks nice and has O-ring seals instead of gaskets, which unfortunately on the sump end still leaked once I ran the car for a bit. I entirely blame that either on myself or the fact that the surface this mates to on the sump isn't machine flat, but using some Permatex black gasket maker looks to have sealed it up nicely. While I'm admitting to my errors, I also had a coolant leak at the turbo. Easy fix, I had to tighten one of the banjo bolts more to get it to seal, and I only burnt myself a few times doing this because I was impatient. Think I'll be changing these coolant lines anyway at some point, so keep an eye out for that in a later video. With that back in though, I let it idle for a bit and get some temp while checking over everything for even more leaks. Then change the oil and filter, which all looked free of any real metal from drilling the sump. Things were all looking good now, so I cleaned up the heat shields with a wire wheel drill attachment, gave a quick blood and flesh sacrifice to the wire wheel for this, as is custom, and threw them on. Not perfect still, but perfect is the enemy of good, and good makes progress. We're up to date now, and those mistakes are out the way. So let's start on some potential new ones. As is often the case around here, and cars in general, we need to start on this car that we're putting back together by pulling it apart just a little bit more. I'm removing the driver's side headlight to make access and filming a little easier. Horns are removed for now. These may be able to go back in this location, but are easy enough to move if we need to later. Then the plastic crash and bumper support comes out. It's common when doing this conversion to simply delete this power steering cooler by joining the two hoses. It is only a small cooler and wasn't there for the E-Series Falcons, so would likely be fine without it, but I'm thinking it could be kept with some tweaks. This could of course be made easy by changing to a factory turbo power steering cooler, which runs up higher and out of the way. I did try sourcing this from a few wreckers, but none were in stock, so either not enough of these are wrecked, or too many are destroying the front ends in accidents while showing their bros the sweet turbo sounds.
It's just a little airborne, it's still good, it's still good!
Instead, I've marked a few key spots and hope to remount this under the radiator support. It won't get a huge amount of airflow, but has to be better than nothing at least. Two hoses, a few nuts, and the old mounting brackets are removed, and yep, it wasn't coming out, so I cracked it and gave it a chop. Okay, so that was sort of the plan anyway. I just hoped I could do it at the bench with a bit more finesse. The approach I've taken is pretty budget minded still, and trying to make it possible with as few or as basic tools as I can. I'm using this cheapo eBay spec brake line cutter and flaring toolkit to give clean cuts, and I'm completely making this up as I go. The first cuts are made and I've test fitted up to see where we're at with some test hoses before making some further cuts and adjustments. I've also made some small bends in the pipes to divert where the rubber joiner hoses will be away from the edge of the radiator support, which could damage these. Once I think we're looking good, I've used the flare tool in the kit to put a very small flare on the ends and round them with a file so there's no sharp edge. It's only a slight single flare, not a bubble flare or proper bead, which would be ideal, but I couldn't find a reasonably priced tool to do this in these lines. These lines are a low pressure return anyway and may never need this, but it gives a little more resistance to the hoses coming off unplanned. Along with the original mount being hacked off and stud punched out to act as a proper backing, the modified hardline sections were then given a quick coat of paint before being mounted with some longer hardware under the radiator. Temporary hoses are now refit for a test run because I am not a smart man and didn't already have the exact hose to spec for this. It will look the same to you at home though, so probably shouldn't have called myself out on that. It's a bit low, but isn't lower than the cross member behind it and the engine cross member. The old bracket for this was a similar height and not damaged. The under tray will fit back on below it with a very small trim of one of the vertical pieces, and some early turbo BAs even had one in a similar location. I'm still trying to convince myself I'm happy with this. Time will tell, and it may get another look one day. Power steering fluid is topped up, and the fluid even comes standard with stop leak now. It's like this leaking on these cars is common or something. The cap is left off to bleed any air while we do a quick startup and some turning to a little short of full lock on each side. The pump noise is horrible, but that's normal when bleeding and soon dies down. It hasn't immediately blown apart or leaked and looks to be working even after some more running. I have enough confidence it'll get us by for now, and I certainly didn't have another spare cooler here waiting in case this attempt went wrong. That's brought the intercooler closer to fitting, but our transmission cooler is in the way. Of course, those in a manual car won't have this and will be laughing right now. And so will those still using the standard auto cooler that's part of the radiator. I know some have made this kit work as is, but it just wasn't going to happen for me. I feel this is needed to help the good old BTR live though, and I've spent money on it, so it's staying. Many have relocated this to under the driver's headlight, but again, I'm trying to keep it simple and something that as many people as possible could do at home. So I'm going to try another option for this transcooler before jumping to anything more drastic. In preparation for this option, the thermo fans have to come back out. Now a little more difficult as it doesn't fit past the oil and coolant line holder at the front of the engine. It does just sneak out with the top radiator mounts out the way though. With the nice PWR bracket removed, I'm now going to mount this cooler with the use of these pass-through mounting ties that were supplied originally in the kit directly to the AC condenser and radiator. Still not ideal, but it is listed in the instructions from PWR as an option for turbo applications, like we're about to become. Foam pads are placed behind each mounting point of these ties so there is no metal on metal. They also have a little give to try to keep tension for mounting on these foam pads, not any condenser or radiator tubing. Trim the ends, thermo fans back in, and now that we finally have room to move our stock intercooler in and out, we can work on mounting it. Some may get lucky and already have some of the mounting holes, but of course, that's not the case for me. The shape and location of the mounts gives a good idea where this wants to be, which unfortunately isn't centered but offset to the driver's side a little, which drives people nuts. I get it now. Between this, judging by holding some of the intercooler piping up to it and some hopes and prayers, I've marked the 4 mounting holes and drilled them out with a 9.5mm drill bit, then mounted it up. That damn transcooler though. Even by loosening and moving the lower radiator support as far back as I could, I still needed to space the top of the radiator back to clear the top intercooler pipe to the transcooler. I was really on fire. This may have worked fine if I'd moved the transcooler just 3 to 4 centimeters to the left on the condenser. Rather than remove the intercooler to do that, I want to find out if I've got anything else wrong with the mounting of this by fitting up what's left of the crazy intake piping Ford used to make this all fit. So, masking tape ball spacers are staying for now. I'll work through this piping as we go to help check off that you have them all, but here's a good shot of the pieces we are working through. First up is this long section of piping that goes from the compressor outlet under the alternator, then around to the inlet of the cooler. And it just fits with the modified power steering lines, which I've been quite concerned about. This near straight section goes from the cooler outlet. The metal pipe is next. Make sure an old sensor is still installed to block off what would otherwise be a big boost leak. This boost sensor won't be wired in. The map sensor in the intake manifold will read boost fine for what we need. Earth and bolt are removed, pipe worked in under the battery and out near the strut tower before replacing this bolt and earth to hold it down. The last rubber section goes from this to the front inlet of the crossover to feed into the throttle body. That leaves only the plastic section with silicone joiners on each end that will connect the front inlet of the turbo to the back of the crossover. Should have done this before the last rubber hose, and the coupler to the turbo needed shortening to fit between that and the power steering. It can stay off for now. This had all fought me a bit now getting here and taken far too long. I needed some motivation before packing it in for a day. First little turbo flutter should help with that. Plenty of you have said just to delete the blow-off valve, and we probably will at some stage. But here's a taste of what that could be for now, with the vacuum to it blocked. Another fresh day, tantrum over for now, and the last piping was fit off camera. I must have got something close to right at least on the mount holes though, because it's all fit up now, and would be 100% set with this setup if it wasn't for the aftermarket transcooler. It took a lot of self-control to not just send it round the block once like this, but we do have no bumper and masking tape radiator spacers to still try sort. Time to pull that factory intercooler back out and deal with any issues we have while trying to fit our other intercooler. I'm going to take a more cautious approach this time by clamping off the lines and removing the transcooler for now. The eBay listing for our maybe slightly upgraded but at very least larger and readily available cooler says it's a straight bolt up replacement for the factory unit and comes with mounts for this, which is internet code for this will not mount straight up and you're completely on your own to make it work. It's common with most larger than stock intercoolers for this AC line to get in the way, and that was going to be the case for us. The tried and tested solution for this is to just bend the thing out the way. Felt really wrong doing this, and be careful not to mess around too much and split the somewhat brittle line or bye-bye AC, but it works. This is a touch more kink than I'd like, but mustn't be too bad because I have tested the AC since and it's working perfectly. Our eBay style intercooler is then held into place using some old milk crates and cardboard spacers. Big surprise here, the mounts were never going to work exactly as they came, and I took the chance to try center it more than the sort of wonky looking factory offset, while also ensuring the stock cooler piping would still work. In keeping with the rest of this video, I'm trying to avoid going over the top with cutting, drilling or welding, so these were bent into a shape that could make use of the brackets at the length they are and as they were drilled, which happened but ended in some interesting shapes on top. The lower mounts were pretty close to good as they came though, and it is all fairly solid. Part of making this intercooler fit was to suck it to that front crash bar as close as practical to try get the transcooler to fit up high without the radiator top mounts being re-drilled to angle back too much, or
to permanently use those masking tape spaces. There's a lip at the bottom of this bar, so this resulted in the intercooler being angled slightly forward and could be angled more if we needed more room up top, but I didn't want it looking too odd. And so I test fit the front bumper to get an idea. Hard to say 100% with the cardboard and tape protection still on, but didn't look ridiculous so far at least. Bumper back on, the transcooler was never going to fit past the bottom section of the intercooler, so that came out after marking some key points to test fit the transcooler in a new location, up high and slightly more towards the driver's side. Test fit looked good, so new cable tie mounts were fitted, tape removed, hoses cut to length, bottom hose back on, and a good chance to refill some trans fluid to make up for what we lost. But remember how I said I'm not a smart man? You're about to get more proof. My funnel didn't fit to the clear hose, so on went the usual tool to fill a little with oil in the hose, then tip it into the cooler. Then I got game and kept pumping. It's fine though, I'll just gently let some pressure out and keep going, it won't be too bad. Idiot. Yep, let's go back to the original plan before cleaning up your mess, champ. I think I knew as I was doing it too. I really didn't want to share that, but hopefully it makes at least one of you out there feel better for something dumb you've done, especially while trying to rush to finish a job. Back to it, the wiring is secured to the crash bar again, and mounts were removed to give the exposed metal holes a clean and brush some clear paint on those so they don't rust. Thermo fans go back in again while this dries. Then the intercooler is fit back up and cardboard shields removed, which was looking good and made me feel even better about the height of the power steering cooler. But still isn't VL turbo low. Top pipe only just reaches with some force after moving the intercooler over, but it's on. The lower pipe fit easy enough. As long as this eBay intercooler performs slightly better than the stock one, I'll be reasonably happy with that result. Last of the problem solving was remounting the horns somewhere they'd be out the way, and I'm reusing the factory mount. I'm leaving the driver's side as a possible spot to relocate the transcooler if we go to an even bigger intercooler in the future, so ideally they had to be on the passenger side. I did what I could to avoid drilling a hole for this, but gave in to the easier solution after a couple of others just barely didn't work. They will be nicely tucked away here. Just make sure to remove some paint somewhere that your hardware or bracket will contact because these earth directly this way. A riv nut would have been ideal for this, something I'll have to invest in. We only have the one power wire to extend with some spade connectors and sheathing to protect from wearing through, and I can now continue scaring cyclists as I pass.
We're now mechanically set for the first drive, and you've all waited long enough for that, so that'll be coming up right now. For me though, I get to do even more work before that, and I'm about to test if that top pipe will stay on with some boost. Now is the ideal time with the bumper still off to do a boost leak test. We've messed with a lot of pieces, the piping condition is a little unknown being secondhand, and any small leak could affect performance. If you'd like to see the cheap homemade parts I'll use for this, or how I've gone about it, I hope to have a short video on this also out soon. I'm sure that'll all go perfectly fine though. Maybe. So, let's skip ahead to getting the headlight in, that bumper back on, with the under tray left off for now, just so I can check for leaks easier. But it will still fit. Then we can take our first look at the front with this intercooler on. Ooh, shiny. And get out for our first drive to hear some spool, or see if there's any obvious signs I've stuffed even more things up. Here we go, this is a big moment. I'm freaking pumped to have this driving again, but I'm at that stage where any little odd noise I hear is certain death or disaster. We can't go too hard just yet, we need to ease into it a little, but we can feel it out and enjoy a few of those turbo noises. Plenty of those already. It feels really keen to come on boost, and the spool and blow-off valve sounds are awesome. Hopefully you can hear some of that. We're still on somewhat of a bass tune, but the car has been on the tuner's dyno before when it was NA, and they've seen more than enough of these cars that it should be pretty safe.
The big unknown is whether everything I've done is correct and matches the info I gave them. First thing to check though is how it's driving, and so far it's completely normal. No bucking or odd sounds. It responds to the little throttle I'm giving it without any weird hesitation, and it idles perfectly, as we've done plenty of in the garage. It does have a tiny rattle here and there from a heat shield underneath me somewhere, I believe, so we'll have to sort that at some point, but it's really not a big deal. With a rougher tune, you'd ideally keep it off boost altogether, but I need to know the wastegate actuator is working and the preload has been set correctly. So I'll roll into it and get the revs up just a little with not a lot of throttle for now. If that goes well, there's one other boost test I need to check. I'll be watching this all on the boost gauge I've not yet mounted and done a super dodgy job running the vacuum line to. But it's still in the box, so it's in mint condition until we install it soon. Let's give this a go. Yep, that looks to be somewhere right around 7 PSI we're getting, I think. Seems pretty spot on. It's a little hard to watch it though, because I'm holding our little analog boost gauge and trying to watch out for the many bloody potholes on this road. We'll have to properly mount and fit this, and that along with a wideband AFR gauge install will be in an upcoming episode, so we can really keep a proper eye on things. And because, you know, it's a turbo car now, and they all need more gauges than normal cars. One last boost test for now that I'm dying to know. Again, probably should refrain, but I'm going light on these tests and using as little throttle as I can really. As much as power is nice, how this car actually drives is more important to me. Oh, and quarter mile times. I'd like to at least not embarrass myself there. Last time, when we were still NA, those times didn't really reflect how the car drove, I felt, largely due to the rubbish 60-foot times. I haven't changed the diff gears or stall converter to address this, partly because they're big jobs and not much fun to do, but partly because I'm hoping we won't have to if we can build some boost off the line to help with those really sluggish takeoffs. So here we go. Without actually launching it, will it build some boost just on the foot brake and still lightish throttle so we can crack those quarter mile times down? Oops. Yep. As long as we can hold it from spinning the tyres, which will be much easier at the track, that was on its way to building some boost. It was already 2 to 3 pounds and holding there. Pretty light throttle though. I'm pumped and a little relieved, to be honest. We may be able to take a couple of seconds off that quarter mile time like we've been hoping to. Hope you've all enjoyed this one. I'm heading home where I'll be walking around the house doing my dumb turbo noises all day. I'm pretty excited about how this is all gone, if you can't tell. Stay tuned for more as we get close to putting this setup back on the dyno for some numbers and a tune. Then back out to the drags to see if we can drop that 2 seconds or so from our personal best, or what we break trying. Hope to catch you all then. Cheers.